Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to Dreamworks Switch to Life. And in today's video, to celebrate its 5-year anniversary, we're going to be reviewing Abominable. So first, let's talk about why this movie is such a miracle that it even exists. So first off, back in 2015, Dreamworks was facing a lot of bankruptcy, and eventually in 2016, they were bought by Universal. Unfortunately, Universal decided to just keep canceling DreamWorks movies in favor of them making sequels based off of their popular IP. And the problem is that meant DreamWorks was canceling a lot of really promising original movies, but this was a rare exception. While Boss Baby and Captain Underpants were far enough along in production that they couldn't be canceled, this wasn't. Luckily, there was hope. Oriental DreamWorks is a Chinese division of DreamWorks Animation, and after they were bought by Universal, Oriental DreamWorks decided to go their separate way from DreamWorks Animation, and because of it, any films that Oriental DreamWorks, or rather Pearl Studios, was making means that Universal couldn't cancel them even if they wanted to. Because of that, Pearl Studios is the sole reason why DreamWorks was able to give us Abominable. So DreamWorks was giving us sequel after sequel after sequel because for a while that was the only projects that Universal would greenlight. That's why Abominable was the only original film DreamWorks gave us for a long time. Until the release of The Bad Guys, that is. So, while Pearl Studios did work with DreamWorks to give him this movie, DreamWorks themselves owns the rights to the characters and the movie itself. However, Pearl Studios did use the profits of this movie to go off and do their own thing, working with Netflix to give us a bunch of movies. In fact, I've already reviewed those movies. Feel free to check them out in the description down below. But with that in mind, was Abominable any good? Yes, actually, Abominable was really amazing. It's helped by the stunning animation, which was created using Moonray, DreamWorks' brand new animation software at the time. In fact, this was their second movie being made using it. And they did a really amazing job, especially during the magical nature sequences when Everest is humming and using his magic to perform, well, magic. I also really enjoyed the voice acting, especially because they got a bunch of Asian actors to portray Asian characters in this film. That's really cool. As for the music, well, I'm not gonna say that it's DreamWorks' best. It's nowhere near as good as How to Train Your Dragon, but the music is really good, and it kinda has to be because there's a lot of scenes in this movie where the music has to do the storytelling, especially when we have Yi playing her violin. As for the story is actually really good, so let's talk about it. The film opens in a laboratory where a giant beast manages to break out. And as we all know, this beast is actually a Yeti. The Yeti accidentally injures himself trying to break out, and in the process, he decides to hide out on the rooftop of a building. And that building happens to be the home of Yi and her family, which includes her mother and her grandma, Nai Nai. And let me just say that Nai Nai is probably my favorite character in the entire movie. She adds a lot of humor. Speaking of, this movie is simply amazing with the humor. I really enjoyed it. So as the film progresses, we see that Yi likes to keep herself busy doing a bunch of tasks so that she can keep herself busy. But the thing is, she's not really doing it for the money. She's doing it so that she can actually just keep busy and keep her mind focused on something other than her father, which apparently her father passed away before the film even took place. And despite it being a couple months, she still hasn't even cried yet because she doesn't want to accept that he's gone. So in the process, she's trying to grow distant from her family, so it feels like her father isn't missing, but she's also keeping herself busy so that she doesn't have to think about her dead dad. I guess we all have our coping mechanisms. But anyway, we're also introduced to a couple of other characters, Jin, who lives in the same apartment complex, and also his cousin, Peng. Peng is a little kid who is really into basketball, which makes sense, but then there's Jin, and I both like and dislike Jin. At the start of the movie, Jin is obsessed with his social status. He is constantly posting on social media. He's hanging out with a bunch of jerk friends. But that doesn't mean that Jin is a bad guy. Turns out he actually cares a lot about his family and even his friends, especially Yi, because he actually considers her as part of his family, which is really cool.
Jin!
Hey, girls.
Woo! How many girlfriends do you have?
At the start of the film, he's pretty shallow, but he ends up evolving into a more emotional person, which is really good. But anyway, as the film continues, we see that Yi actually plays the violin. She tells her family that she sold it so she doesn't have to spend time with them, but the truth is that every night she goes up on the rooftop to play a lullaby that her dad played to her when he was still alive. But this night, there's a Yeti on her roof. At first, Yi is pretty scared, but eventually she gets closer and discovers that he's injured. So she uses some of her money to purchase some medical supplies, and she ends up healing him. She even names him Everest, and eventually realizes that he needs to go home to his mountain, Mount Everest. Believe it or not, this film was actually going to be called Everest, but unfortunately it was renamed, probably because you already had a character named Everest, and the goal is to get to a mountain called Everest, so. But anyway, Jin and Peng discover Everest on the rooftop, and Jin makes a call to the police that there's a wild animal on their roof, and it's picked up by the people who are hunting Everest, and so they come to Yi's rooftop and a chase sequence begins, and it eventually leads to Yi sending Everest out on a boat, but unfortunately she feels like Everest can't really take care of himself, so she jumps after him. And then Peng jumps onto the boat, and forced to come along so he can protect his cousin, Jin jumps on the boat.
My babies!
And it's at this point that we're introduced to the antagonist of the movie. We meet Mr. Burnish, who is a very old guy who one day went exploring in the mountains and discovered a Yeti. And when he tried to tell the world, he was laughed at. So he spent his whole life trying to find proof. He captured Everest and studied him for a few days until he escaped. So he hired a bunch of goons to hunt him down again. And these goons, led by Dr. Zara, as well as the goon leader, who Mr. Burnish keeps calling Captain, but we never really learn this guy's name. But I just gotta say that I really enjoyed these goons. A lot of time in media, especially in animation, the goons are just faceless people who mostly look the same. But in this film, they actually look very different from one another, not to mention they all feel like their own unique individual characters, especially Dave.
Locked on target.
Dude, you darted Dave.
Yeah, we lost them.
So at this point, the film is taking a road trip approach, and now the kids are trying to get Everest home to Everest, and in the process, they're going through a lot of very famous Chinese locations. They start at the Yellow Mountains, where they are spotted by the bad guys' drones, and they are separated from Jin, and while Yi, Peng, and Everest are in the Gobi Desert trying to make their way to the Yangtze River, Jin is stuck with the bad guys, and he discovers that Mr. Burnish, despite trying to hunt them down, isn't actually a bad guy. He's actually a nature lover, and that's why he went into the mountain in the first place. But over the years of trying to find a Yeti, he kind of lost sight of what he loved about nature.
Sir, if we...
Look at this tree. It's a wonderful tree. Look at the colors. I love this tree. You there, chop it down and put it in a bag, will you?
Right away, sir.
But being out in nature trying to find the Yeti is actually rekindling his spirits and making him realize why he loved being outside in the first place. Unfortunately, there is a twist villain in this, and that is Dr. Zara. She's a British zoologist who is trying to say we should protect the Yeti at all costs. But unfortunately, that's actually a lie. She's actually an American bounty hunter who is trying to capture the Yeti so that she can sell it to a buyer. She's forced to keep up this animal lover act, which isn't that great. Luckily, Jin manages to escape, and he crosses China to get to the Yangtze River, and in the process, he evolves as a person, even going so far as to give away his phone to an old man so he can use his boat to get to the Yangtze River.
What happened to your babies?
Well, Peng,
My babies are all grown up.
He reunites with Pang, Yi, and Everest, and then he helps them escape from the bad guys, and Everest manages to use his magical powers to literally turn a meadow of flowers into an ocean with waves. I really enjoyed seeing that. Unfortunately, Everest, being a kid in Yeti years, can't really control his powers, and the boat ends up crashing, and Yi's violin is destroyed. Yi and Jin have a heart-to-heart in the jungle.
Do you even want to be a doctor, or do you just think that you'll look good in white?
Alright, call me shallow all you want. Hate to admit it, but I mean, that thought about looking good in the white doctor's coat, it did cross my mind. I am a horrible, horrible person.
And when they come back, they find that Everest and Pang have used magic and Yeti hair to fix Yi's violin. Then Pang finds a bunch of postcards that were in Yi's violin case, and it turns out that they were postcards from her dad, but they're to all the locations that they've been. Turns out that during the road trip, they've been visiting the locations of places where Yi's father wanted to take Yi someday, which is really cool. But I'm pretty sure it's just a coincidence, because I don't think Everest is actually that smart to have planned out the entire trip to make it so that they go through all these places. And eventually they stop at the final postcard, the Lijon Buddha, and it's there that Yi plays a melody on her violin, finally accepting that her father is gone and dead, but also that he will be with her in spirit. And it's also revealed that since Yi's violin is made with Yeti hair, she can actually perform magic to make flowers grow around the Lijon Buddha, which is really cool. So the gang travels all the way to Mount Everest, and at the foothill of the mountain, the bad guys catch up to them and stop them. And it's at this point that Mr. Burnish, who has been hunting the Yeti, realizes that the Yeti needs to be able to return home because that is the best way to protect it, to keep it a secret from the world. Unfortunately, that's not Dr. Zara's mission, and so she betrays Mr. Burnish and then has the goon leaders shoot the Yeti and then also kidnap the kids, everyone except for Yi, who decides to fight back against Dr. Zara and in the process is thrown off the bridge to fall to her death. Luckily, she manages to catch onto a rope, and when she climbs back up, she uses her magical violin to wake up Everest, and then Everest uses his magical powers to fight back against the bad guys, and then Dr. Zara, in her rage, tries to actually kill Everest with her car, but in the process, she ends up causing an avalanche, which kills her as well as the goon leader. Mr. Burnish gives the coats of the goons to the kids so that they can take Everest all the way to Everest.
I'll be waiting right here.
I just wanted our coats, Dave.
And it's there that they manage to have a family reunion with Everest. Everest says goodbye to the kids, and then the Yetis use magic to make it so that the kids are transported back to Mr. Burnish and his car, and so Mr. Burnish gives them a ride home all the way to the city. And the film ends with Yi finally embracing her family and deciding to spend time with them. And we also see that there's a package addressed to them from Mr. Burnish, which includes a bunch of adventuring equipment so that they will be ready for their next adventure. And that's when the film ends. So I know what you're all thinking. Should this film have gotten a sequel? And to that I say yes and no. There's a couple of loose threads here where Mr. Burnish gives them a box of adventuring equipment for their next adventure, which to be honest could be pretty much anything. But at the same time, we also don't know who the buyer is. We know Dr. Zara was trying to capture the Yeti for a buyer, but again, we still don't know who this buyer is. But honestly, the whole point of the movie was to take Everest home. And now that Everest actually is home, there's no reason for there to be a sequel. Unless, of course, you want to ruin the ending of the first film. But if you really want, you can go and check out the TV show Abominable: The Invisible City. Not only does it make a pretty good sequel, but it's also a great TV show as well. It's available on both Peacock and Hulu, and I highly recommend that you go and watch it because I plan to be reviewing the TV show sometime later next month. Honestly, I really enjoyed this movie for what it was. It was very good and very funny, and it was definitely very emotional. And, well, the only critique that I do have is that we still don't know the identity of the buyer, which, again, loose plot thread for a potential sequel, but at the same time, I honestly don't want there to be a sequel. But what did you guys think? Make sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comments section, and also be sure to support me through my membership program by clicking the join button down below or going to my channel page. Or if you want to do the free option, you can always just subscribe. But with that in mind, I hope that you're staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.
We've been waiting for you to eat.
Oh, I ate on my way back, so I'm good.
Either eat here or there, but never on the move. That is what I say.